Hi, my name is Rosemarie Ferrante, and I'm the Vice President of the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce. CCND is the statewide nonprofit organization comprised of seasoned mediators and collaborative divorce professionals in the legal, financial, and mental health disciplines. Through our series of discussions on Community Forum, we are furthering our collective mission to guide families smoothly through the divorce process and help them restructure in a healthy manner with a child-centered focus. In today's episode, we're focusing on how spouses can unravel their spousal relationship and build a strong co-parenting relationship. I'd like to introduce two of my wonderful colleagues, Jennifer Luis Champagne. She's a licensed professional counselor whose career has been devoted to the emotional and parenting issues associated with divorce. Over the past 35 years, she's focused her work with parents as they address the changing needs of their family, coaching parents as they share the decision to divorce with their children, creating parenting plans for the time of separation, and addressing communication challenges that impact parents and their children. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Rose.
I'd also like to introduce Michelle Adelman. She's a licensed practicing therapist who's been practicing for over 30 years, holding an MS in counseling psychology, providing individual, couple, and family therapy, as well as co-parenting, counseling, and collaborative divorce mental health parent coaching. Michelle has delivered the Connecticut Judicial Branch Approved Parenting Education Program for over 11 years. And by the way, I failed to mention, Jennifer is the immediate past president of CCND, and Michelle is the current secretary of CCND. So, hi, ladies. Nice to see you.
Hi, Rosemarie.
Hi, Rosemarie.
Thank you so much.
So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how spouses who are going through the divorce process can unravel their spousal relationship and build a healthy co-parenting relationship. So we're going to be providing some information and resources. And please feel free to reach out to us after the show if you want any links or information to anything that we're discussing. So I'm going to start with asking you both to share some of the key issues that children face during their parents' separation.
One of the things that kids experience, I think one of the most important challenges for kids is a loyalty conflict. And a loyalty conflict is something that a kid will feel whether their parents are explicitly asking them to be in the middle or if they are simply in high conflict. And so the problem with this is that kids feel everything that's going on in their family system. They notice when their parents are obviously loud and fighting. They also feel it when there is a quiet tension. And because of this, they will internalize it. They will believe perhaps that they are the reason that all of these problems exist. And because they're taking on this responsibility, they're going to do whatever they can to minimize the conflict that they feel around them. And some kids are going to become the perfect kid. Some kids are going to act out. But what we know is that this creates an anxiety for these children. And because of this anxiety, they're going to sublimate their own needs. They're going to focus on what their family needs from them. In this way, kids can end up in a number of different roles. They can end up being a support, certainly for their parents. They can be a messenger. They can be a reporter. They can end up being asked to be in the role of judge. And ultimately, and so damaging, they can end up being asked to be a confidant for one of their parents. And remember, kids don't have to be asked to do these things. They will take on the responsibility. A loyalty conflict is when a child doesn't have permission to freely express their love for both of their parents. And it's natural for kids to want their parents to come through for them, to be nurturing and emotionally available for them. And when they believe that they're going to be betraying one of their parents for having a loving relationship with their other one, well, then they are in a bind. They're literally in a bind. And the only way that they can get out of this bind is by having permission from the parents to freely express their love. with both of them.
Thank you. So one of the key takeaways from our discussion already is for parents to recognize that giving their children permission, explicitly or implicitly, to express their love for the other parent is so imperative during the divorce process. We're going to talk more about some resources a little bit later on. Is there anything, Jen, that you want to add to just that concept?
So in addition to that, it also kind of moves into another element of what parents will notice for their children. And when they're trying to have these loyalty conflicts, they're also having their own emotional reactions, these children, to what it is that's going on in their family. You know, mom and dad or same-sex relationships, their parents are telling them something is changing in their household. And that's going to be really sad. It's going to be really confusing. And they want to make sure that that relationship they have with each of their parents is maintained. And they don't know how to navigate that. They want to feel the freedom and the joy and the love that they always had in their relationships with each parent. They're not really sure how to do that. Going along with that is we always have to remember that these children are growing and changing and going through their own developmental stages and trying to make sense of who they are as humans. And so as they're becoming these developing humans and struggling with the emotions of their family, it gets overwhelming and confusing to them, and they really just don't know how to navigate it.
So what I'm hearing is that kids also, in addition to having the permission, so to speak, to express their love freely for each parent, they also need to feel comfortable recognizing and articulating their feelings, because their feelings are not only developmental, they're different per each child and the family dynamic. You know, I want to take a breath for a moment and ask you both to share something that many people don't really understand, which is what is a co parenting counselor? Because I do think that many times people are going through the divorce process and they don't even know that this professional exists to help them with just these issues. So I know this is sort of off script, but can one of you speak to that for a moment?
I'll say something, and then so we exist as one of those roles in ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. We want to be a first stop for parents who are either going through a divorce, contemplating a divorce, or post judgment. They have completed their process and they are now struggling with communication. So our role encompasses a number of different things, but primarily we want to make sure that parents are presenting as a united front to their kids. And so we're going to assist them with mechanisms to communicate well. We're going to assess how high conflict are they, or not high conflict, because depending upon that, we want to meet them so that they can have the best communication, the most flexible co-parenting relationship, but also minimize the amount of conflict that they have in their interactions with each other. So communication is a very big part of this, helping them to come to stay focused on what is in the best interest of their children is also a very big part of what we do. Rather than having them focus on their thoughts or feelings about each other, we want to make sure that they are staying very focused on the most important thing here in the equation, which is their children.
Thank you. You know, go ahead, Jen. You had something to add?
I was just going to add something. Sometimes parents misunderstand co-parenting because we're using the word counseling, that this isn't marriage counseling and it's not couples therapy. It's a very forward-looking process. And as Michelle said, it's all about their children and redefining their parenting relationship so that we can move them from being spouses who are parents to, or partners if they weren't married, and simply parents together, which makes their relationship only centered on their children and not about them and where they had been and how they had gotten there. and more where they are going in the future surrounding their children. So it's an important distinction. I just wanted to point out, because sometimes parents become reluctant to participate in co-parenting, thinking that it's going to be couples therapy, and it's a very different process.
Thank you. And I think that we can all agree that the process of unraveling a spousal relationship that's been built up over years, many times, and unraveling that and rebuilding an effective, healthy co-parenting relationship is not easy. And it's a process, and it doesn't happen with a magic wand or overnight. And often through this process, people are, you've got to kind of break down that marital relationship and the way that you had communication and rebuild something different. And I think that as a mediator, as a collaborative divorce attorney, it's really important for us to share this with our clients, because that effective communication isn't going to happen overnight, and really is best when guided by professionals such as you, who recognize that, who work with divorcing couples all the time. And the last thing I'll say on that is that communication is key, because most people who are getting divorced don't have spectacular communication. But what they do have usually is a love for their children. And, they both usually really want to aspire to being the best parents they can be. And so when we're talking about best interest of the children, I think most divorcing couples will agree that they certainly want to do this in a way that's healthiest for their kids. Any thoughts on that?
I do, about communication. When parents are struggling in their marriage, or even when they're together, it's not uncommon for them to have different parenting styles and disagree on child raising practices. But the way I like to describe it to my clients and the families that I work with is, when children have parents under a roof, there's a safety and a security in the fact that they have access to both of those parents on a day-to-day basis. So if one parent has an opinion and the other parent has an opinion, and someone's decision is the one that becomes in practice, there's a safety and a security of those parents being under one roof. As we fast forward and we have two homes and two roofs, and when parents aren't communicating, it leaves children confused. It leaves them stressed, and it leaves them struggling. Because if bedtime is at 10 o'clock at one house, but at 8:30 on the other house, if one parent finds out about it, they're going to be mad. And now children become keepers of secrets, keepers of information, and they make those decisions to try to keep the peace. And having parents transition to working together better for their children in a very child-centered perspective takes that pressure on those little shoulders off of the children. And it allows the parents to do the work that they need to do in parenting in two homes. We want to build a bridge between these two homes so that children can just travel back and forth and be kids and worry about soccer practice and, who's the cute kid on the bus that's talking to them. We don't want them to worry about, are they going to get to practice? Are they going to get in trouble for going to the mall without supervision? Are they going to have to manage how their parents are feeling about these things, which is just going to weigh them down? So that communication piece that parents struggle with during a marriage and a relationship that now has to work well, and oftentimes better than it did under that one roof, doesn't just happen. So the resources that exist, either with the people like Michelle and I, or some of the other resources we're going to talk about, is key to making sure children can worry about just being kids.
Thank you. I really like how you put that, because it's co-parenting. Most parents, when they are separating or getting divorced, they've been parents a while. And so they think they've got this. They know parenting. Co-parenting is a very different animal. And so that visual of doing it in two different houses and creating that safety that the kids still need to feel is so important. And so you both work with couples who are separating or divorcing. in that communication that's so key, so that the things we identified before, loyalty conflicts and emotional turmoil, are alleviated as best they can be for the children. I'd like to turn the conversation a little bit to loss. And maybe, Michelle, we can pick up with you on that. Let's talk for a moment about what are kids going through in terms of loss and grief.
Sure. And if it's okay, I just want to like to add a little something to what Jen said, because she said it so well. And parents are moving from what was implicit communication to what I talk to them about needing to move to explicit communication. This is a new game, and there are new rules in this game. And it is important for parents to be much more intentional and explicit when they have a thought or a feeling about something, so that they can be sure that they're expressing it very, very directly, because kids' lives are moving forward and there are so many moving parts and so many decisions to make. And you can't assume that one parent is thinking something. Now we need to have it stated or in writing or in some other form. But I think that is part also of moving from the spousal parenting to co-parenting. As far as grief and loss, kids are experiencing, and their families are experiencing, so many different losses through this time. And as Jen said, and you said, Rosemarie, depending upon their age, their stage of development, and their temperament. We can't forget that. There are flexible kids who are going to handle this differently. There are more rigid kids who are a bit more difficult in all types of situations in life. And this is a big one. And so they're going to have different reactions. Another thing that we want to remember about kids is that they're going to experience their grief and loss at each stage of their development. So they have an initial reaction to this crisis in their life, and they're experiencing it through the lens of what I just said: their age, their stage of development, their temperament, their family situation. And then every time they go through another developmental stage, they are going to have a more mature, a different understanding of what happened. And at each point, they're going to be internalizing this experience as a part of who they are. Okay, now I'm in high school. I love math. I love soccer. My parents got divorced a few years ago. That's one experience. Another experience is I'm in high school now and I love math, but I can't really concentrate on my homework because there's still so much tension at home. And I'd like to get to soccer, but I never know who's going to be picking me up or bringing me to practice because my parents aren't talking to each other about this. So these are the things that are going to contribute to how well a child can move forward through their own grief and loss process. Another thing to keep in mind is that kids are going to grieve potentially. They'll be all over the place, like ping pong balls. 1 minute they'll be doing really well, and the next minute they may be falling apart. And this doesn't mean anything negative. It just means that their well of resource has been drained, and now is when they need something, which leads me into what I think is the most important element, which is the idea of a parent being an emotionally available, safe place for a child to actively and sometimes more passively grieve. The attachment, the security that a parent is cultivating with the child is going to directly impact the child's ability to feel safe and comfortable to express what their need, to express their sadness, their anxiety, and their anger. A child needs to know that a parent is going to still be there in spite of them expressing their anger. A child sees what's happened when anger is in the room. A relationship may end, a parent may leave. And so this is where it's our job as the parents to make sure that we're sitting there and we're saying, I'm here and I've got this and I'm going to keep listening and I'm not going to make excuses or deflect this onto the other parent or blame anybody else or get angry back at you. When a parent has developed a secure attachment with a child by letting that kid know that I'm focused on your needs and that I'm here in a predictable way and I'm here in a consistent way for you. Not perfect, but predictably and consistently available. Then a child believes that they can bring to their parent whatever it is that they need to, and that that relationship is going to be there for them for the long haul.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I always love to hear Michelle talk about loss and grief because I think it is one of those things that parents are not well versed on. They compare grief to when they lost a parent or a loved one. And while it's very similar, it's also very different. And as Michelle talked about the need for the consistency and how they experience it again at all of those developmental stages, parents are surprised when years down the road they get remarried or they have a new baby. And I know in this talk we don't have time to go into all of those things, but all of those events coupled with their changing developmental stages has children revisiting and going through their parents' divorce time and time again. And it is a piece of divorce for children that I consider often overlooked by parents, not intentionally, because every parent doesn't want to overlook something about their child, but it becomes overlooked. And then children are struggling and parents are surprised and ill prepared to manage those feelings.
Oh gosh, so much here. So I do want to transition the conversation to resources that we can provide parents. But I do just want to mention, the overriding theme here is that the parents really need to sort of be the beacons for their children's emotional reactions, their responses, their ability to help the kids navigate this. And just like in any aspect of our children's lives, um, being an emotionally available parent is really the key to allowing our kids the safe space to express their emotions and to learn how to navigate these things on their own because it's a big bad world out there, and whether it's due to their parents' divorce or their own relationships, these are things that are going to help them become resilient, emotionally available adults of their own, right? So I'd like to hear from you both about, in addition to co-parenting, counselors such as yourselves, what other resources are there for parents who are embarking on this journey to help them understand how they can best do everything we've been talking about?
I'll start. um, there is a film that I think is important for us to share with the viewers of this show, and it's called Split. And we actually, through CCND, did a presentation on it to professionals. But it is a great film that has the capacity for parents to view it. And it is made up of children who have gone through the divorce. And it shares their feelings, their concerns, their experiences right from the mouths of them. And there's two pieces of Split. They visited those same children 10 years later to see how they fared later on. And it's a wonderful showing of what it really is like when parents separate and the things that they wish parents knew while they were going through it to try to make things easier on them. So that's one resource that parents can certainly look into and access.
Thank you. And just for everybody's knowledge, you can find out more about the film on their website, splitfilm.org. And we can put that in the show notes afterwards. So in watching these videos and understanding that children have some typical emotional responses, maybe we can just we only have a few minutes left, just talking about what are the key strategies and strengths that come from these supportive co-parents through this process. So what we were talking about, prior to the show, Jen and Michelle, were emotional resilience, coping mechanisms. Michelle, do you want to touch on that a bit?
Sure. Kids are looking to their parents as the leaders of their family. And when parents are able to do this well, it's really important for parents to know that their kids are going to be able to do this well also. Kids care about a number of things, and as long as their families are stable and they know that their parents are moving forward, then kids are not going to be stuck. They're going to be able to move forward as well. Kind of coming back around to where we started, that loyalty conflict is what's going to keep kids stuck. Parents doing this well will allow children to move forward on the things that matter to them. Resiliency. Yes, kids are resilient, but they also need nurturing, and they need to have the consistency in their own lives.
Anything to add for that in about 30 seconds, Jen? No pressure.
No pressure. Looking at it from the children's vantage point. That would be my wrap up from what it is that Michelle was talking about. When we look at things in a child-centered view, not how the parents think their children would like to see it, but from a truly child-centered view, we can walk in their steps and see it from their eyes of what they're struggling with and what they're not struggling with then. And that will help parents guide their actions.
Thank you both so much. So to wrap it up, I think that the biggest message is that divorce per se doesn't negatively impact kids. It's the conflict that the parents are exhibiting and experiencing with the entire family. And so there are ways to alleviate that. So for more information, please go to our website, gooddivorcect.com. And you can also, again, check out the film Split on splitfilm.org. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Rosemarie.
Thank you.